Howdy gamers. In this video I'm going to be talking about why to run the runes that are good on Viktor, not just what to run. The main thing with Viktor is that he's a control mage and that the runes are really just for the early game or through the utility that can be offered that scales from minutes like 15 to 40. So really the only keystone options are in the sorcery tree in Airy, Phase Rush, and then Arcane Comet. You could run the inspiration runes, but they're really unnecessary for Viktor. Like Glacial Augment, you could have slows on your auto attacks, but you're already going to be getting slows through his hex core, so that loses a lot of value. The Unsealed Spellbook, you don't need the utility through extra combat summoner spells for Viktor. He gains more through having either a winning early game through the damage runes like Airy, or having the extra movement speed through Phase Rush. The Phase Rush is going to be equating to more damage than you could be getting or protecting yourself from through Unsealed Spellbook. Like you can have Barrier, Exhaust, Ignite, Heal, etc. with Unsealed Spellbook whenever you approach for fights, but the trade-off for doing so is not having the extra movement speed. And with Viktor, movement speed is one of his best resources, as he's short range, but then he wants to be moving just in range of the enemy to damage them. And yeah, so the keystones they are really choosing are Airy and Phase Rush. You could use Arcane Comet. My problem with Arcane Comet is that the runes are really for the early game. Even though you can start using the Arcane Comet in the mid game, because you get access to the slow through the hex core, and then the cooldown on it is going to be reduced pretty quickly through the Q and the E on Viktor, and then with your ult as well. The damage that you're going to get from it is going to be pretty insignificant in the mid game. The damage that you deal with Airy in the earlier stages of the lane is really impactful, and your scaling is mostly going to be through your itemization on Viktor and on most control mages. So Arcane Comet could give you more damage in the mid to late game, but the trade-off of doing so is having a less useful rune in the early game, and by less useful I mean it's like not useful at all. You miss out on either the advantage that you can gain through poking out a weaker lane opponent with Summon Airy plus Scorch, or the utility that you can have in Phase Rush to avoid melee champions, and then overall just gain better positions in fights because of the bonus movement speed offered. And then I suppose a little bit of 2v2 potential with it, as the movement speed helps you get out of a gank initially and then go back into damage. So starting off with Summon Airy. With Summon Airy, you damaging an enemy champion with basic attacks or abilities sends Airy to them, dealing damage based on your level, and then also off a little bit of your AP. And then if you somehow shield or heal an ally, Airy will proc, but Viktor really doesn't have ways to do that. With Summon Airy, the huge utility in it for Viktor is that it's like a no cooldown damage keystone, and it can be used just off your auto, so that you're just getting more damage. So whenever you're running the enemy down, the cooldown of Summon Airy is how long it takes Airy to go from you to the enemy and then back to you. So if you're moving into them, the cooldown is lower because Summon Airy is coming back to you. If the enemy is moving into you, the cooldown is lower because Summon Airy is coming back to you. So in defensive situations, you're getting more damage off, and then in offensive situations, you're getting more damage off because the cooldown of Summon Airy is just lower. If it's a neutral situation, it's all right. You're not going to be getting as many procs off unless the enemy takes, like, basically trading two abilities where Airy is still coming back to you and then still dealing more damage. Where it's also procced off your auto attacks is very important, because with Arcane Comet, it's not guaranteed to land, but then you also have to be spending an ability to get the damage off with it. With Airy, you just have to auto attack once, and then you're just getting more damage off with the auto attack than you otherwise would be able to. Against weaker lane opponents, melee champions or short range champions, so champions like Ornn, maybe an Irelia, maybe like a Mordekaiser mid lane, and then like short range champions in the mid lane, champions like Ryze, Azir, where they have to scale up too. Airy gains a lot of value because the damage is going to stick to them as they don't have any sustain, and then you're way more likely to get it off because of the range values of those champions compared to Viktor. So against those champions, I think you should be looking to run Summon Airy. With Summon Airy, it puts you in the sorcery tree. I think that your best bet for the second rune is going to be Mana Flow Ban. Mana Flow Ban gives you access to more mana for damaging the enemy champion with an ability. So hitting an enemy champion with an ability permanently increases your maximum mana by 25 up to 250. So it's a sapphire crystal for free, which is pretty big. After you reach 250 bonus mana, you restore 1% of your missing mana every 5 seconds. And then mana flows on a 15-second cooldown. This in combination with Hex Core just gives you enough mana to play with. It's pretty important for Viktor, as even though you might not be spending a lot of mana whenever you're just laning, whenever you do start all-inning, you're going to be getting multiple rotations of your E and Q off, so it's important to have the mana to actually cast those abilities in. Mana Flow plus Hextech Core plus Blue Buff, it's really, really hard to run out of mana, if not impossible. Season 10, gotta love it. They gotta rework Red and Blue Buff, man. For the third rune, I think that Transcendence is your best bet. Absolute Focus isn't as valuable for Viktor, as you're going to be gaining your AP advantages through itemization. You don't need to get it through runes. And Transcendence is going to help you like bridge the gap of cooldown reduction, as you're going to be getting cooldown reduction from Blue Buff, and then potentially through Ludens, Lichbane, Zhonya's, etc. And with Transcendence, you gain 10% cooldown reduction once you reach level 10, and then excess cooldown reduction becomes ability power. So even if you're building a weird path where you're going over CDR, Transcendence like converts that into ability power anyway, so offers more versatility, and then having more abilities up is going to equate to more damage. Having your abilities up more often, I should say, is going to equate to more damage than Absolute Focus can offer. The bonus movement speed gained from Celerity might seem tempting, as movement speed is really valuable for Viktor, but even one of the champions that rely on movement speed the most, he just doesn't care about this rune. All movement speed bonuses are 7% more effective, and you gain 1% movement speed. It's just so bad, man. It doesn't even come close to having your Q and E off cooldown faster, as you're going to get more movement speed through having your Q off cooldown more often than you would from this. Sad rune, man. For the fourth rune, I think that Scorch is your best bet. If you're running Seminary, you definitely want Scorch, as both in combination is just giving you more damage in the laning phase. With Scorch, your next damaging ability hits that hit. Why would they word it like this? Every time you damage an enemy champion with an ability, it deals a little bit more damage. That's basically what Scorch is. And then Scorch is on a 10-second cooldown, so almost every single time your Q and E is up, Seminary and Scorch is just going to be dealing more damage with both of those. And that's really the huge value in them. For the secondary runes, everything's really, really useless for Viktor. So things in the inspiration tree become more valuable for him. So like precision, like you could have damage amplification from like Last Stand, Cut Down, or Coup de Grace, but Viktor just doesn't need that damage amplification, as it doesn't do enough for him. Because even with like Coup de Grace, you deal 8% more damage to champions who have less than 40% health. Yes, that can give you more damage, but it's going to be giving you more damage maybe on like 1 Q and then 1 E, and then that 8% increase, you're going to be killing the target anyways. I don't know a matchup in which you would really need that damage. And then having something like Presence of Mind is okay, but you're really not running out of mana anyways. Triumph also wouldn't be too bad, but still, you just don't need these combat stats. It's more about like getting your power through your itemization on Viktor. With Domination, it's also pretty low value. You could have Taste of Blood and like Ravenous Hunter. Taste of Blood, pretty common for most control mages, but like with Taste of Blood, you gain more HP throughout the laning phase. With Taste of Blood, you heal whenever you damage an enemy champion, and then it's on a 20-second cooldown. So with that, you just have more effective HP whenever you're trading in the lane. So across like 3 minutes, you just have more HP every 20 seconds, and that puts you at better lane states, and then with better lane states, you get access to more CS and whatnot. With Ravenous Hunter, you heal for a percentage of damage dealt by your abilities, and the problem with Ravenous Hunter is that you have to stack it up. It's based off a Bounty Hunter stack. You earn a Bounty Hunter stack through getting a unique killer assist on an enemy champion. For Viktor, that's hard, because you have to have a successful team fight, and you have to be involved in the killer assist to stack it up, and then the reward for doing so is also kind of whatever. You do gain access to more healing, but like champions like Cassiopeia just use Ravenous Hunter way better than Viktor ever could, because they have single target damage, and they dump out way more damage. Even though Viktor has pretty consistent damage, you do have to stack this up, and then it's not going to be matching like a DPS champion. So I don't think it's that high value for him. Anything in the resolve tree also isn't necessary, because you're either winning lane or you're wave clearing. So having the trading tools in like, let's say, Bone Plating, Revitalize or something wouldn't be so useful. And the inspiration tree, it really comes down to like everything was useless in precision, domination, and resolve. So like free boots and biscuits just kind of beat all of those. With free boots, you're saving 300 gold, and then with biscuits, you're gaining access to more mana, and then a little bit of trading tool in the lane phase. With biscuits, you receive a biscuit every 2 minutes until 6. The biscuits restore 10% of your missing health and mana, and then consuming or selling a biscuit permanently increases your mana by 50. So it gives you 200 mana for free. Mana Flow gives you 250 mana for free, and then Hextech Core, plus maybe a Ludens, plus a blue buff. Really, really good luck running out of mana. And with all of those in combination, that's giving you access to more damage. And really how Viktor wants to function is just staying alive in fights, staying at range of the enemy, and then dumping out abilities once they're on cool or off cooldown. With magical footwear, you're saving 300 gold, and you don't need to buy boots before 12 minutes anyways, especially in the mid lane on Viktor. And then the extra 10% movement speed offered from them is really useful for him. So even if you're not getting a kill in the early game, if the enemy doesn't have magical footwear over them, you're just beating them by 300 gold because of it. And in a lot of matchups for Viktor, since he's a control mage, that's really what you're doing. It's usually this economic battle. So magical footwear helps you win in that sense. For the shards, I think it's going to be Adaptive Force, and then depending on your lane matchup, you obviously want armor if you're playing into AD, and then magic resist if you're playing into magic damage. Running defensive, like double defensive runes isn't as good on Viktor because you have enough range to deal with even hard matchups, and then if you still want to be able to trade with them meaningfully, so having the ability power helps you do so. Even if you're taking more damage, the biscuits are going to help offset that, and then maybe a corrupting potion will as well. So that's the default runes I'd recommend for Viktor into melee matchups or short range matchups, because Aerie helps you punish them more. Into melee matchups that dive onto or long range matchups, I think Phase Rush is better. With Phase Rush, hitting an enemy champion with 3 attacks or separate abilities within 4 seconds grants you bonus movement speed based on your level, and then 75% slow resist. The movement speed is increased for melee champions, not useful for Viktor. And then the duration is 3 seconds, and then the cooldown on Phase Rush is only 15 seconds. So you can use this once when trading in lane, and then it's up again pretty soon. Like if a melee champion was to all in you, champions like Irelia, basically champions that have to dive onto. And then in 2v2s, it also gives you a lot of value as it helps you run away from the enemy, because even if you know that you're getting ganked, you could auto Q and then E the enemy and then run away as you have the Phase Rush proc. If the enemy gets on top of you unexpectedly, you can kind of do the same thing. Drop W, auto QE, or even ult EQ and then run away. And then if things are going in your favor after that, you can look to move back into them because of the duration of the movement speed increase. So there's offensive utility for Phase Rush. If you're winning, you can run them down, as naturally whenever you're landing your abilities, it's going to give you more movement speed to run them down if you want to, or more movement speed to dodge their abilities after you've cast yours. If you're losing, then it helps you run away. If everything's neutral, then it's still pretty okay, as the movement speed is going to help you move between offensive and defensive positioning, both into and away from the enemy, depending on how the fight's going, or if you're trying to dodge a skill shot or whatnot. So Phase Rush is more useful, especially if you can't bully the lane opponent with Seminary. So wave clear matchups, matchups that are naturally losing for Viktor, champions like every dive champion like Katarina, Kassadin, Pike, Irelia, etc. Phase Rush is going to help you against them, as it helps you run away, and then through doing so, you're surviving the early game, and then if they're not killing you in the early game, you do overcome those champions in the late game. So that's really the only variations for Viktor, I think, that are that meaningful. And again, with the secondary runes, I think that Inspiration's the best, as your control mage, the economic battle is the best approach. Having the 300 gold save from boots and then the mana gain from biscuits does just outweigh all the little bonuses you can get from runes, as you're going to get the most utility and strength from itemization than you can through runes for Viktor, so might as well do that. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Viktor's runes. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I try to answer all of them. If this video helped you, leave a like on the video, helps me. You should also subscribe, because if you don't, I don't know what I'll do, man. I might have to lock in Syndra instead of Viktor. Twitch.tv/SorryNelson, links in the description, but you don't have to check that out. You just have to subscribe, okay? Thanks, man. I know you would. Sick. Alrighty. Pound it.